Good.
All right. If everyone can hear me, I'd like to welcome you to the Town of Waldoboro Public Forum to discuss the two proposals that will be placed on the upcoming town meeting warrant, or vote, I should say. The first is the 80 Gray Park Coalition proposal, and the second is the Volunteers of America Northern New England Chapter proposal for the site. Each presenter, those two groups, will have up to 1 hour to make a presentation and to ask questions. This is designed as a forum to provide information to the public about these two proposals and to provide an opportunity for the public to ask questions. Keep in mind, this is not designed as a debate, so public comments will be limited to questions only. And the moderator reserves the right to interject and ask the questioner to refrain from any comments or editorial statements and confine themselves to a question. Just think of it as a Jeopardy. Everything has to be a question on that. In order to maximize time for questions, I encourage presenters and questionnaires to be concise and brief. That way we can get as many people as possible from the public who would like to ask a question to be able to have that opportunity. To keep a somewhat of a limit on the questions and answers, that we are going to have a 3-minute limit on any one particular question, and likewise for the answers up to 3 minutes. And we will, if anyone goes over, we'll prompt you that you're exceeding your time. So with that, we will begin with our first presenters, which is the 80 Gray Park Coalition, and we're at 6:04, and so we will end at 7:04 and pass the torch to the next proposal. So I would ask you to begin, and if you can introduce yourselves.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Saran Pine. I am a resident of the town of Waldoboro. Have been a resident for over 38 years now. And to my left is Vicki Bell. Vicki, you are a resident of
I'm a resident of Waldoboro and a business owner in Waldoboro, and we've been in Waldoboro for about 1.5 years.
And to my right should be Glenn Barber, who has not gotten here on time. Glenn is born and raised in Waldoboro and a resident too. And the three of us actually are from very different backgrounds, but we have something in common, and that is we have we are part of a group that has a vision for Waldoboro having a nice in-town park. And you know, every week in national newspapers and in our state and local newspapers, you can read about a park and all of the benefits that parks provide to many, many people. Just last week, there was an article about Booth Bay. I think, wasn't it, Vicki? That there was a park in Booth Bay that received some funds.
Private donor and matching donors through the state.
Private donor and matching donation through the state. So since last November, when the select board put before the town an article that was non-binding as to whether the town would go along with a sale of the 80 Gray property to the Volunteers of America, the 80 Gray Park Coalition was formed. And we have, as our group, we have accomplished a lot in these last 5 months. We have formed our coalition of local citizens. We have received pledges of over $180,000. And we now have a plan for the core issue of community for our historic district in Waldoboro. Just so you know, we did receive cost estimates for raising the building and creating this 8-acre park. And those numbers may change over time. But the purpose of the numbers and the purpose of having a landscape architect draw up a concept plan, which I believe you can see on your screens now, was per the advice of the manager of the Land and Water Conservation Fund in Augusta, that it was and is a way to get the ball rolling and to demonstrate to everyone that we can have a park located on this property, which was given to the town. It was not given to the town so it could sell it for $1 and so that other persons could reap financial gain. To place our article on the June 8th ballot, we needed 232 signatures from registered voters. We stopped gathering signatures at 350, and we could have gotten more. We have ensured that the citizens are given a clear choice. We are not professional fundraisers. We're not in the marketing business. We're not in public relations. We are not any of those things. We don't have a fancy PowerPoint presentation for you. And we haven't called anyone in from Augusta to represent our project. Instead, we are local citizens who are committed to our town. We are committed to Waldoboro, to our children and our grandchildren, and to the future of our historic village district. Now, if Glenn Barber were here, he would be saying to you that if you love the A.D. Gray building, and if you think that question 45 will pass, that property will be for the benefit of 32 unit renters, not all of the citizens of Waldoboro. Where do you want Waldoboro in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years? The Park Coalition wants a park for everyone, for families, for children, for citizens. And so we urge everyone to vote yes on question 46 and no on 45. Thank you. And so we're ready for the first question, which I think we know what it is.
So,
Max, would you, we have three sources of the public, people there present physically, people on Zoom, and then some questions that were sent in. Can we just do a round robin and ask one from each as we move along?
yeah.
So if you could start with those present there physically.
Well, as I discussed, Bill, there was a very frequently asked question that I think, well, a few people already have, maybe in the audience. And just a quick thing for those who are on Zoom, if you do intend to ask a question, if you click the reactions button, it's on the bottom of your screen, there is an option to raise hand. Select raise hand, and then please leave that up until you are called on. Thank you. So the first question that I've been receiving from multiple residents: can the two proposals coexist with Volunteers of America rehabilitating the former 80 Gray School for affordable senior housing, and the park proposal utilize the remaining 7 acres of town-owned land that would still contain Philbrook Ball Field, the tennis courts, and 2 acres of undeveloped land? If not, what makes these two projects truly incompatible?
I'll take that answer. The two proposals cannot coexist. One reason is the logistics of parking. As it stands now, 2 parking spots are required for each unit VOA builds. That's without going for any variances. This does not include parking for the staff, the visitors, delivery, maintenance. Alone is roughly 70 parking spots. I mean, it's going to be a lot of parking needed for 36 units. There will likely not be enough space to account for all the parking required for VOA visitors and proposed park visitors. And the second, the scope of what the park could be would be greatly limited. Third, there are many who strongly believe the town should retain ownership of this special property located in our core historic village district and not see it being given away to anyone. We do have a Facebook page. I will put up the original deed for the land, and it really stresses the fact that the people who deeded it in 1935 really want it to the inhabitants of Waldoboro to use for their own use. Parking is another issue. And also, if we had that space cleared, that could be a good place for parking for the park, for Waldoboro Days, the gazebo, and also if you had the gazebo up on the higher point of land, people below could see everybody. If they're having a band or something in the gazebo, or if you do a movie on the lawn, having that higher location free and clear would give greater access for use of the park.
Excuse me, was Max supposed to put a photograph up now?
Oh, I don't know.
Just
All
asking.
right,
Just asking.
all right, thank you. Next question.
So if we're gonna, is there someone in the audience who has a quick question? We have one in the back.
I'm Jeanette Wheeler. I'm a resident of Waldoboro. With the, so many people leaving urban areas and buying properties in rural areas, I think the value of this land is tremendously higher than maybe evaluated even a year ago. I know of people who have sold their homes in a day or two. And I think we ought to consider that this land is very valuable.
All right, is there a question there?
Excuse me?
Is there a question?
Yeah, the question is, what do you think about the increased value of this property over maybe what it was even a year ago?
Waldoboro land has greatly increased, and houses, they're gone in a second on the market. But I mean, the value of this land is also just historic. It's in a, it's next to 1,800 farmhouses. It's already got a walking trail, and the value is to the town to keep it as for Waldoboro, and certainly not give it away for $1.
All right, thank you. Next question.
Is there someone on Zoom who had a question? I don't believe there was anyone on there. Not yet, at least.
All right, Max, do you want to go to one of the questions that were sent in?
Yep, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna probably mispronounce this person's name. Deidre Marie, has your group explored the feasibility of using the pledged funding for park infrastructure and maintenance costs as opposed to demolition of the building so the two projects can be allowed?
We did not do that because we really just want the park and not have the two projects coexisting, for the reasons we stated with question 1.
All right. A question, go ahead, a question from the audience, audience there.
Well, there was actually sort of a follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
There
ahead.
was a close question that I think it's pretty much what they answered from Karen Clark. Has this group considered using their funds to improve the trail loop in the town to improve and connect the pocket parks and river park properties, which she believes would be a better use of funding? I assume the same answer.
These ideas are outside the idea of the core village and the historic village district. The trail loop and other trail or hiking ideas are different from a community park. That's not to say that this group would not support recreational trails in Waldoboro and adjacent to the park project, but we are devoted to the park at this point.
Okay. And now I see a hand from George Seaver.
Yes, the picture that's on the screen right now has a triangle and a rectangle with a bump out of it. Is that the entire parcel of land? I thought it was about 8 acres.
That does not show the entire area. You're absolutely correct. This was an original concept plan that we did. Nothing is cast in stone in that plan that you see, but you're correct. It does not show the baseball field, which is to the, I'm not sure that's to the north. I'm going to say that's really to the west.
To the top of it, yeah.
Yeah, so that is not shown on this plan, nor is the location of the current tennis courts, which is also an issue for our park. Thank you very much, Max, but there goes your head. The current tennis courts are located in a state and town designated wetland, and the removal of those tennis courts and the restoration of the wetland area, it should be addressed and needs to be addressed. That will not be touched upon, to my knowledge, by the Volunteers of America project at all.
So to complete the question, what percent of the entire parcel does your proposal with the dotted line around it represent? Is that like a quarter of the land or half or a third?
No, all of it. That's
Well, now you
80
just told me it doesn't include the rest of the property.
No, excuse me. The plan that you're looking at does not include the entire property.
Right, but what we're talking about is the entire property, isn't it?
It is, but the plan's cut off at the top.
Yep.
You're right.
But if the limit that you're talking
Am I
about
not
is to do,
answering it correctly?
Does Philbrook Ball Field incorporated with your overall plan?
It is part of the park.
Does that answer the question, George?
Got it?
no, because the concern about multiple uses for this property primarily was about parking problems, but I have no idea how much parking space there is if you start considering the whole, I think it's 8 acres.
For the park?
For the property we're talking about, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it about 8 acres?
It is. It's 3 lot. It is currently 3 separate lots. Each is owned by the town. It includes the area that the school is on, plus the tennis courts, which are actually part of the same lot, although Volunteers of America doesn't want the tennis court area for their dollar. And then there's what I refer to as the intervening lot, which is a vacant lot between what was the former school building and the Philbrook Field.
So when you were, this is a question.
Okay.
Yeah,
If you were excluding the idea of both purposes for the property on the basis of not enough parking, it seems like the entire parcel of land should be part of that evaluation.
I'm not sure I understand your
Well,
question.
parking was just one of the
Parking was-
reasons,
yeah.
yeah.
Parking was just one of the reasons.
yeah, I think they're, at this point in time, it's a concept plan. So there's a lot of things that have to get developed as time goes on, George. I don't know if that helps clarify.
Yes.
Yeah. Why don't we go to the next question? If there's someone from the physically there at the town office?
Anyone?
Yes.
Yes. You have to
I
speak
have
up on
been
this one.
told, excuse me, I've removed my mask so I can hear, see. I have been told that those tennis courts cannot be moved because there was a grant that put those tennis courts in place and they cannot be moved.
The tennis courts were built in, I'm taking my mask off because
I
it's
don't
too
care
hot
when they
here.
were
Thank
built.
you.
This
But
is what I was
let me
told.
tell you, the tennis courts were built in the 1970s,
Yeah.
about 50 years ago. They were built with the use of
Federal dollars.
land and water conservation funds. And I believe it was about $5,000, although I think Max would tell us.
7, I think. But
So
yeah.
was it 7, something like that? They can be moved or destroyed, and a similar use doesn't have to be tennis courts. It could be park benches, all that sort of thing. It has to, whatever if the courts are declared obsolete, which if somebody plays tennis around here, they probably would say they're obsolete. If they've been declared obsolete, then I believe that the town is able to remove those tennis courts from the wetland area and restore the wetland area, provided that the town uses some funds to create some amenities for a park, for example.
So where did this information come from?
I actually personally represented the Bureau of Parks and Lands for many years in Augusta, and I have been, as has Max Johnston, our planner, and probably a couple of other people in the town office, in contact with the Bureau of Parks and Lands and the person who manages the land and water conservation funds.
Did you
So-
ever hear the comment that I made? Have you ever heard that stated?
I think
I'm not questioning you. I'm
I
just saying
understand that. I think I may have heard that comment, and it is something that concerned me at one point, because I thought that there could be, I'll say, there could be penalties if the town eventually does nothing with these courts, with this tennis court area. The town could be penalized in some way if they were to go and get another land and water conservation fund grant, or even some other grants within that department. This is my understanding. So that's an excellent question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next question from the Zoom audience.
Well, actually, it was a written question next.
Oh,
actually.
go ahead, Max. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
This question is from Bill Maxwell. Other than, quote unquote, it won't be our seniors that will be living there, can someone from the coalition give 3 valid reasons for not having 80 grade turned into affordable senior housing? So that's question 4.
Oh, question
Question
4?
4.
Okay,
Do you want to answer that?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, he wants 3 reasons?
3 reasons.
Yes.
Okay. There aren't, one of the reasons is there are many places, a vast number of suitable acres where senior housing can be located.
Could you speak more into the microphone or take your damn mask off? I can't hear you. I have no idea what you're saying.
One of the reasons is that there's plenty of acreage around. They don't have to take this one little piece of in-town historic land for $1. They buy land in Thomaston. They could buy land all over Waldoboro and put 72 units if housing is needed that desperately. And this is a park that's already in use by the town. People walk down the street all the time. I live across the street from it on a personal level. I don't want a 36-unit apartment building built across from my house. I would imagine most people would not want a 36-unit apartment, 3-story built across their house. And also a park would be used for a community center. I don't mean like a community center. I mean the center where the community to gather and do all the things that they've done in the past. Waldoboro days, Christmas items, all, if someone wants to do any activities, they could do it at this park. It's centrally located. You could walk to the library, you could walk to the theater, you could walk to town, you could walk to the water and still be on sidewalks. So those are just a few of the things why we wouldn't want those things.
So now the next question, I saw it in the chat a while ago. This is from Barbara Boardman. How do you propose visitors turn around once at the end of the dead end road? This is Philbrook Lane. Particularly if parking is full, seems like a logistical problem.
I think parking could probably be, if we got rid of the school, put the parking towards the front where the school was. So this way they don't have to go down that road. But otherwise, if they did go down the road, you could park at an angle.
Well, also, if I'm correct, people right now for the baseball, for the Philbrook field, people actually park on the street. And our concept plan, which again is not cast in stone, is just a concept, that provides for additional off-street parking to the east of the baseball field.
Okay.
So
All right.
the gentleman has his hand up here. Max.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
I just want to throw something on that, with what you were saying.
Yeah.
I've got FedEx truck. I live at 68 School Street. I am right next door to the school.
Yeah.
There's FedEx trucks, there's UPS trucks that go down that dead end street all the time, turn around and come back.
Uh-huh.
So
Not a
No.
problem. Yeah.
there's no problem there.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
All
So,
right, thank you. There's a question online, Max.
Yeah.
Yep, Laura.
yeah, Laura.
Oh, thanks. Laura Bucksbaum. I live on Fintown Road. I've been in Waldoboro about 15 years. And just full disclosure, I need to tell you that I am a Maine housing commissioner. So I do have an interest in affordable housing. But my question is about the fundraising for this park. I understand you've raised some money, and I'm not sure if I understood that's already enough to raise the building or if you just have estimates, but wondered about your fundraising plans for raising the building and then for building the park and then for maintaining the park, or would that be the town that would maintain the park, and what So what information do you have about that?
Well, I'm glad that you've asked that. I am a little confused, Bill. I don't know if Bill is listening, if Bill can hear
Yeah.
me or not, or Max, because we were given these 26 questions today or yesterday, and that I'm just not sure. I mean, that is actually addressed in a number of these questions. So should I be combining the
If
questions?
you want to just combine some of those questions.
Okay,
for-
I'd be happy to do that. And so, Laura, if I more than answer your question, it's because of all these other questions. So we have, I think, first of all, you're asking, how did we raise that money? And I would say, no, you're saying no.
No,
Is that-
not how did you raise the money? I don't, how much have you raised, what have you raised money enough to do? And what's the plan for raising money enough to do all the rest?
We have raised more than enough money in our estimation to demolish the building, remove all of the debris, to remove the tennis courts, to seed and loam, and to fill, seed and loam the, I've got that backwards, don't I? It's fill, loam, and seed the area. That is, we have raised more than enough. And by our estimations, if we were to get a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, we could, in fact, do that in such a way that no money would be needed from the town. I'm just trying to find my little answer here, so that I can, again, this is, if this passes, the funds would be held in a separate 501c3 entity dedicated to the project after the Article 46 is passed. So as of now, there's no dedicated funding, for example, for Volunteers of America's project, nor do they have to provide it at this point in time. Presumably, if they exercise their option sometime in 2022, they will obtain the funding, but as of now, they have neither committed funding nor they have either know if the project is financially feasible, which is why they want an extended period. As of now, we have more pledged funds than they do and a much better idea of what our project will cost. The pledges are from proven donors who have previously been very generous in their support of the Broad Bay Church, the Waldo Theater, the Waldoboro Public Library, and many other local charitable endeavors. So by breaking up the demolition project into two phases, we believe we can avoid any use of town funds, even borrowed funds. If the town takes the demolition project on, it will it could absolutely achieve a positive tax flow, which according to the head of the Public Works, when he discussed his department doing, which was according to the head of the Public Works, when he discussed his department doing the demolition. So we will be glad to work with the town manager to show her how this would work without town funds.
Can I ask a follow-up? I didn't
Yeah,
quite.
quickly.
I didn't understand what you meant about tax flow. How could there be tax flow from a park? Did I misunderstand that?
I don't think I said that. I said cash
Cash
flow.
flow. Yes. Well, how could there be cash flow from a park? What would people be?
No, I'm actually referring to prior to the during the demolition process, the Land and Water Conservation Fund grants are a matching grant 1-to-1, and you have to ask for a reimbursement. And so the way we've done is we split it in two so that the first reimbursement actually doesn't even comes nowhere near what we have in pledged donations at this point. So that's why I said that we don't think that the town will have to pony up any funds or borrow anything in order to get their reimbursement. I should also say that reimbursements, at least this is from my conversation with the manager of the Land and Water Conservation Funds grants, he has told me that turnaround time can be as quick as 1 week, not 1 year, as some people have said.
All right. Can we go to the next question? Max, if there's someone from the audience there in the town office has a question?
Oh, darn hot.
Yeah, my name is Seth Hall. I'm a resident, and in full disclosure, I'm a candidate for this year's select board election. In preface to my question to the coalition, just as background, I think it's important to mention a couple of things. I was one of the 2 people with John Blaney and the Potomac Valley Community Foundation that proposed converting this building and property to a community center. We did a townwide survey. We had an 82% response rate wanting the community center at this location in that building. That was declined by the select board, and it sat fallow for 2 years until now. One of the reasons we want to do that in this location is because it's the center of our historic village district. I'm also a businessman. I've invested heavily.
Can you ask a question, please?
You said I had 3 minutes.
Yeah, to ask a question.
I will. Okay. The coalition, if the Volunteer of America low-income senior housing is not approved by town voters, would the coalition be willing to compromise and consider some other beneficial use of the existing building in lieu of tearing it down, e.g., in addition to creating your proposed public park, perhaps a community center, for example? I strongly support the park. I strongly support the development of the village. And I'm just wondering what your view of a potential much smaller reuse of the facility without the doubling of the size in this giant new structure they want to build. Is there any possibility to talk about that?
Well, we've already answered the question that the 2 proposals cannot coexist. Bringing in a 3rd option is not one that's been presented to our donors, but I can tell you that the donors the questions that we have asked the donors is, could the 2 projects exist? And the answer is no. We've surveyed the donors. The pledges only apply to the project as it's been outlined, including the rendering concepts. They will only fulfill their pledges if Article 46 is approved, and the funds will only go to the 8-acre park. If you have something that you're proposing that is different, then you should probably be telling everybody to vote no on question 45. And I don't know what you would do with question 46, but I certainly want everyone to vote yes on 46.
Can I follow up, Bill?
Just very quickly, Seth, very quickly.
I personally, I will vote no on 46. I think we should have the park.
On 46.
45.
Thank you.
I'm asking a loaded question. If you have the opportunity to do something with this property because you win the election, the warrant article, are you going to be willing to listen to other people's input and build not only a park, but potentially consider not the VOA proposal? I'm completely against that huge extravaganza personally. We don't need it for lots of reasons. Would you consider not tearing the building down and doing something beneficial for the same beneficiaries of the park, the citizens of this town?
I think it would depend what the.
That's a fine answer.
It would depend, yeah.
Why don't we move on to another question? There's a couple that have been coming up on the Zoom, and then Max, we can do one from the comments that were sent in.
Yeah, and these were questions that we already received prior, so I'll read the one. Andrew's asking this online, and I know another resident has asked this. Exactly how much money do you have? And if you don't receive your grants, exactly how much money are you asking the town to give? I think that kind of ties into some other, another question that Bill Maxwell's asked.
Which question would that be, Max?
Number 17, where we have been told that there are pledges up to 180,000. At this time, will you produce these financial documents and let the select board, town manager, and public review them? And if not now, then when and to who? I believe Andrew's question ties into this as well. How much money do you have? Which
as I've
It's more
already said,
verification.
as I've already said, we have pledges of over $180,000.
Oh,
And you need to understand, or I'd like people to understand, that we don't even have a published brochure. We have had people contact us saying that they really want a park, that they do not, and you also need to understand that we're not against senior subsidized housing. We hope VOA acquires other land to build their units. And we hope instead of 32 units that they build 60 units someplace else. This is about using a scarce, highly important piece of land in our community, not for just a very few, but for everybody in Waldoboro. So back to question 17, under what or whose name are the committed funds being held? Right now we have pledges. When Article 46 passes, then the money will go into a 501c3 and a nonprofit entity. And that nonprofit entity will then work with the town to pay, to come up with the actual plan for raising the building and doing whatever else needs to be done.
And then,
Did that
Right.
answer that?
yes, and actually, I didn't mean number 17 of
Oh,
Bob Butler's question with number 20. Is this money from private donors already secured, or is it verbally promised to fund if the park initiative succeeds at the polls?
that's number 20?
Yes, that's what I have for number 20.
That's number 19.
I'm sorry, I might have. So it's the same question.
As I said, the pledges, Bob, are from proven donors who have previously been very generous in their support of our town. They have supported the Broad Bay Church, the Waldo Theater, the Waldoboro Public Library, and many other local charitable endeavors.
There's some questions from the Zoom audience, Max.
Uh,
And Mitzi, I think, had a question,
yeah,
and George Seaver also is.
I do actually have one. Let's go with Jan, just because she hasn't spoken yet.
Yep.
So Jan, go ahead. Jan, did you want?
Yep, sorry. Jen Merritt, I've lived in town since 2002. I just want to know, have you given any thought to those of us who live in town that might need senior affordable housing, would definitely be interested in staying in town and living in the village as we age, especially due to the ease of walking around the sidewalks and having good access to the businesses downtown?
That sounds really good. And we would love everyone to stay in the village, and we love Waldoboro and all the citizens. But there's no guarantee any citizens are going to get into the VO housing because they're not giving priority. There are other options in town. I know Sproul Block right now has 2 openings. So if anyone's looking for affordable housing, there's 2 openings. And also, to stay in town, if someone has a house and they can't afford it, and maybe they want to have something more affordable, they could actually invite a neighbor to stay in their house and get the HUD money themselves if they rent out an apartment or the room. So there are options for Waldoboro citizens. They could come together and maybe help each other out if they wanted to.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone from the audience there again, Max?
I don't see any hands.
All right, do you want to go to one of the questions, and then we'll go to the Zoom audience? I see a hand up there too.
Yep. So I think they're all still okay. Well, I'll skip to a frequently asked question on the back. I believe it's number 25 for you. Who will pay? And this is actually another comment I think I saw online on Zoom. Who will pay for the long-term maintenance of the park, which includes but is not limited to trash cleanup, mowing the fields, plowing the area in the winter, managing the wetland area near the tennis courts, and hosting the proposed events that were mentioned in the petition and/or past presentations?
How we kind of see it is, number one, the town already mows the lawn for the area, so that wouldn't be any increase in any budgets. But also, we would like these events to be townwide and generate some income from the park. If Waldoboro Days, if there are booths being held, we could gather money from them. If someone wants to do yoga in the park and run a class, they would do a small, a single use day permit fee to the town. And those little fees would add up to maintain, improve, and also just do the garbage and some landscaping. But a lot of it would be probably donations and also volunteers. And I know I, for one, would volunteer for any board or coalition for the park. If we have some events like car shows or food truck Fridays, these are events that could be put on the park's own social media site. I know Booth Bay does this quite often with their park. It's Barrett Park. It has a gazebo and they run events all summer long. So people know to look out for what's going on next in the park. And those events do raise money for the upkeep of the park.
Thank you. Max, do you want to go to the Zoom audience for the next question?
Yeah, I see George's hand is up. So, George?
Three quick questions. When I was listening a few minutes ago, it sounded like the commitments from your donors kind of hinge on the plan as the plan is presented. Is that correct?
No, thank you for that question, George. That's not quite true. What we did is a concept plan. That's what we did in
So
December.
I'm going to stop you. So it doesn't have to be exactly what you've got drawn here.
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct.
Right, and so does the concept plan funding cover the cost of making tennis courts?
I believe that I can't quite answer that
Do you
question.
want him to
I
put
think-
the Warren Park to see the simple
Oh,
part?
sure. Go ahead.
Max, could you put up the Warren Park pictures?
Oh, yes. But go ahead and start answering the question.
Yeah, well, and my third question was, how did you arrive at the cost to tear it down and remove it and clean it up?
We had an estimate from landscapers.
Well,
Land,
George-
But
lands-
also, excuse me, George, but we also had the town's, what's his name?
John Daigle.
John Daigle. Thank you. John Daigle also gave an estimate.
So not somebody who's in the business of tearing down buildings and cleaning them up exactly.
Well, we had someone other than John Daigle, so we got two estimates. The town is more than welcome to get as many estimates as they want.
So, George, if you don't mind, there's actually a similar question, if you don't
Okay.
mind me jumping in on
Oh.
that.
Sure. Yep. Thank you.
This was from the written comments. Oh, I had it just a moment ago.
Oh, I think I know which one you want.
Yeah, it's about how many estimates did you get and what was the cost of these estimates? Oh, yes. Karen Clark, how many quotes does the coalition have for raising of the former school and what were the prices?
Oh, I didn't see that. Which
Uh,
number's that?
Either 11 or 12 on your thing.
Actually, 11 says who's going to supervise demolition of the former school? And that really is either the outside bidder or the town's public works, if the town wants the contract. And again, if we hope that the town would pay for the landscaping, which should be a plus for our budget, and if we would consider paying the town for the demolition, which would be a significant advantage for the town's funds. And as I said, Public Works has previously offered to do the demolition.
All right. Max, I don't see any other hands up from the Zoom audience. So if there's no one at the town office, would you just go on with another question that was submitted?
There is another question at the time.
Oh, yeah, Seth?
Given that the there's an interest by the town in the medical arts building, potentially located up behind the Miller School in, behind the Miller ball fields. And that the town is already owning that land. And as you mentioned, it might make sense to build some kind of housing, maybe much larger somewhere in town, because we need senior low-income housing. Might it not make sense, from your perspective, would you comment on this, to keep the public park in the town, building or otherwise, and then put the low-income housing right next to the medical facility and right next to the grocery store that's going to end up, being adjacent to it on the hill behind the Miller ball fields?
Well, I think that would be a question for Volunteers of America. It would make sense to us. Certainly, it is less expensive to build new than it is to do a renovation. And because people say there is such a great need for senior housing, why are they looking at a project of only 32 units? Why aren't they looking at a project of 60 or 62 units, which they have experience in? Volunteers of America has done projects of that size in Maine. And certainly, because of how funding sources have changed, they should be able to do that, I would think. That's certainly a question for them.
My real question is,
Why don't we move on to another question from the list, Max? I don't see anyone else on the Zoom audience, so.
Again, this is a question from Bob Butler, either 13 or 14 in your case. Considering the Waldoboro landfill is now closed and clapped, where is all the debris from the school and tennis courts going? And has that been included in the demolition quotes? I think, and Bob specified out, I think this was about just how much is this cost? That might have been a separate question.
I can just tell you that the disposal costs are included in our estimate, in the estimate that we received. I never asked where all of the debris is going. I don't know if that would be of a particular concern to Bob, but I'll try to find that out for him.
All right, Max, if you could go to another question that was submitted.
George, I do see your hand up, but I do want to just get to make sure there's no other questions that were asked beforehand that were sort of burning ones to ask.
Right.
Well, I know that this was just asked by Seth, but I guess this is a bit more direct. Bill Maxwell, the town has plans to develop a parcel of land for a park and other recreation activities near Miller School. This is the property we were just talking about. At this time, can the group give 5 reasons why the recreation complex at Kaler's Corner, which is behind Miller School, is not good enough for this proposal?
And what number is that, please?
Number 5?
Oh, easy. Okay, easy. Okay. So the overriding reasons.
I don't really know the Kaler's Corner. I know his project was posted online, and I guess it was an old project the town wanted. I don't know if they're going forward with that or.
I have not heard anything about that old project. No one has come to me and to say, here's this project that we had 20 years ago and it's still on the table. I've never heard that.
All right, thank you. George, you want to go to, Max, you want to go to George?
Yeah, I've just got a quick follow-up.
We have 10 minutes, so be very quick.
Very quick. The question was raised earlier by one of your numbered questions about the other estimates to have it torn down. What were the numbers and who were they? I'd still love to hear the answer to that. Who else made estimates other than John Daigle and people in the landscape business?
Are you asking for specific people?
Well, that's what the question you read asked. So I was just asking to refocus on that part of it.
I honestly am not 100% certain, but I believe that the Public Works Department's estimate was in the area of like 200,000, something like that. It was not a lot. But it was a while ago. Maybe somebody else knows who was at that meeting. And our estimate is in the area of, well, our estimate was, I should say, in the area of 253,000. And we added on a little over 20% to take it up to three and a quarter, only because we thought, we think that the actual work may not be done for a number of months. I don't know. And so as a result, everyone knows that the cost of construction and materials has gone through the roof. So who knows whether costs have gone up that much or not? I don't know, but we did that to be cautious.
And so that was the first time I heard a number higher than 180,000. Did I mishear?
I guess you did. The 180,000 is the amount of pledge money that we have raised, but we also said that we would look to the Land and Water Conservation Fund to do a dollar-to-dollar match. I think I said that in my answer to Laura. Is it Buxbaum?
Yeah, thank you. I
Thank you.
do recall that.
Max, would you want to go to one of the other questions that were sent in?
Yeah, I received this question I received this question about today. Again, frequently asked, who is on the board, your board, of the Park Coalition?
There you go, Vicki.
Well, myself, Vicki Bell, Saran Pine. We have Jerry Hungerford, Glenn Barber, Jeanette Wheeler, and Susan Swede. And, you know, we do on the board, but then we have other people that help us out and do a lot of projects that have to be done.
Good, thank you. Max, if there's no one there physically at the office that has a question, would you take another question that was submitted?
Seth does have a question.
I'd just like to re-ask my question because I didn't feel like it was answered. Could you just summarize for us in the 5 minutes you have left or whatever, what you see is the contrast between the benefits to the public and the citizens of Waldoboro of having a good, beautiful, centrally located, walkable park in the historic district downtown village, as opposed to VOA, wherever it might be, there or otherwise?
Thank you for that question. Our project envisions a beautiful downtown, in-town park for all citizens of Waldoboro, not for just the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, however long a building will last, but forever. And it is an area that everyone can use. It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, where you live in town. If you don't live in town, you can use it. It will be open to the public. If the town were to sell this building for $1 to Volunteers of America, that property will no longer be public. You won't be able to go there. In fact, at one point, Volunteers of America, I believe, said at one of their meetings that we could use their community room, but then they backed away from that. At one point, they said it would be, the units would be available to the citizens of Waldoboro, and then they backed away from that and said, no, they would not give priority to the citizens of Waldoboro for that building. So this park, on the other hand, would be here 30 years from now for everybody still, not for just a select group of people, but for everyone. And the whole purpose of a park is just such a wonderful thing. Because of this pandemic, people across the country have discovered the beauty and the wonderful benefits of going to a park. We don't have that here in a lot of towns in New England do have a town commons, or they have a wonderful park. You'll see
Village Green.
the Village Green. We don't have a Village Green, and that's what this would be for us, will be for us. Our group, even though we are, as I said, we're not public relations, we're not in marketing, we don't have a fancy PowerPoint presentation for you, but we did manage to get the written approval and support of the Trust for Public Lands, which is a nationwide nonprofit organization that has done parks and recreation projects in Maine, but this would be their first in-town, rural in-town park project. And it would be a wonderful example for all towns to follow. We all
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to cut you. I want to get to, there's still some other questions floating out.
I was about to say, Bill, Bill, are we giving an extra 5 minutes?
Yeah, we're going to go to 7:05.
All right. There is a question from Andrew. He asked the question earlier and he's just trying to reiterate. How much money would the park ask the town if you don't receive the requested conservation grants? So if in this hypothetical that you don't receive the Land Water Conservation Fund grant, how much would you ask the town for?
I'm not really, that's a good question. I'm not really sure. And I think that definitely depends on whether the Public Works Department would get involved. They have said in the past that they would absolutely consider it. And why that didn't occur is really before I was involved in the park project.
All right. Max, do you have another question that was still yet unanswered from the ones that were sent in?
Yeah, well, we do have an in-person one. If it's a quick question.
All right, go right ahead. Yep.
Where does the security for this park lie?
Well,
With the town?
the security would absolutely lie with the town as it does right now.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Max, another question that.
This was a question from Bob Butler. I think this is 21 or 22 for you. What happens to the private funding if the park initiative is rejected by Waldoboro voters?
What number is that?
21 or 22.
Oh, okay.
What happens with,
What happens to the private funding if the park initiative is rejected by Waldoboro voters?
I think I already answered that.
Answered that,
We've
yeah.
surveyed our donors and the
Mhm.
pledges only apply to the project as outlined.
Okay.
Okay.
Max, do you have another question there? I don't know how, do we have quite a few that have, that were sent in that we haven't asked yet, or?
There are a few.
Yeah, there's a few. I think.
Why don't we try to get as many of those answered in the next 5-6 minutes as possible?
All right. Some of these are probably just some yes or no's. Karen Clark, have you included the cost of paving a parking area or adding more lighting to the site? So this is number 8 or 9.
I don't think that is in our project right now, but if you use a crushed stone for parking lot, that would be easy care and certainly cheaper. And as for lighting, there are a lot of solar options right now.
All right. And then,
Probably even get a grant for that.
all right. And then the one just underneath that from Bob Butler. What is the cost of landscaping and park equipment required for the Envision project?
If you could put up that picture of the Warren Park, I went to the Warren Village Park and it was very simple, just village green, crushed bluestone walking path around, park benches, a picnic, and it does have a gazebo in the middle. But it's a simple park, many uses for the town.
Can you show the other photographs, please?
Yeah, that's just that picture's just the crushed stone path, which Booth Bay Botanical Gardens has. I guess it's easy to maintain and also make. Yeah, it's just a simple green space, many uses. So if we did something like that, it would be simple for upkeep. As we gather funds from events, we could certainly add things. I'm sure all the moms in town would like to see some sort of recreation for the kids. But that's something that would have to be discussed.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
It wouldn't have to be done right away.
And then, again, just trying to go through the written questions quickly. 15, I think, or 16. Karen Clark, who is going to pay for a gazebo, playground equipment, and improvement to the building footprint? Is this?
Well, we'll see how much money we have left just to make it a clean slate type of park, but otherwise events could be held that would would generate the income to improve the park as the town
I
wants?
think that was 14.
Or for,
And I had down that the items to be determined, and they have not been determined, will be part of phase 2 and also eligible for public state grants.
All right. Any other questions, Max?
yep, in the audience.
So let's just say the park goes in. Will the town still own the land?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes, okay.
yes.
Who will be liable in case somebody is hurt at the park?
It's a good question,
Well,
Mark.
I think that's really a question for a lawyer.
Well, I'm just,
But
who's gonna pay for liability insurance? Is that gonna be picked up by the town
I think the
or
town,
the park
yeah, I
people?
think the town does. No, it's not owned separately by the park. It might be in the future. I don't know. There has been some talk about the town possibly having a separate park commission as opposed to a committee, and that it would have a separate park fund for monies, but that's never really gotten to any serious discussion at this point.
Right.
And for
Because that is
larger
part-
events, they would probably have to get their own insurance for that event.
Right. So just going through all this list, there's one question that the person who asked it preferred to yes or no. So once I have that, I don't know if there's anyone else.
What number?
Number 27,
27?
26 then.
26.
Oh, I like
From
26.
Bill Maxwell, do you or anyone in your group agree that if an elderly resident moves into this Volunteers of America facility, that they are now, quote unquote, an elderly resident of Waldoboro? That goes to the local post office for stamps, going to Hannaford to buy their groceries, going to Moody's for a meal, using the public library, and going to one of the 3 gas stations for fuel to fuel their car. So this is just a yes or no question from Bill.
Yes.
Of
course, they're a resident.
They're a resident.
Max, do you have any other questions that we haven't gotten to?
Does anyone in the audience have a question or online? I'm sorry, is there anyone online, just very quickly, who hasn't spoken yet?
I think we have time for one more question, actually. So,
The question was asked, this is just for clarification, about what John Daigle suggested about the cost of demolition. He suggested to the select board about a year ago,
No, it's been longer than that.
maybe it was 18 months ago, when this first sort of came up before Volunteers of America. And he said at the time, a commercial demolition would be around 120,000, and he could do it for less,
Oh,
his town group. But that's in the record. You can see it on film. I don't know the date, but it'd be easy to find,
It's like 3 years ago, because I was the one that was pushing for the budget committee
to
to
demolish.
put the money into the funds.
We could easily find that number. It's recorded on video.
great.
all right.
Thank
All
you.
right. Is there any other questions?
No.
So we do have a few minutes. If Saran, you asked for a closing statement.
No, we're not going to do
We're not
closing
doing that?
statements.
I don't
No,
think
no,
we're doing
no,
it. No, that's okay.
All right.
If, I'd like to thank the presenters. That was very excellent. Your answers were very precise
Thank you.
and a lot of good questions. I hope this informed a lot of people who had some questions about your project. And we'll give you a couple minutes to leave the dais, and Volunteers of America will be next. Max, are they in the building or are they going to go via Zoom?
Yep, they are. They're waiting in the hallway. So if anyone did want to just leave now, go ahead. And we'll still be live streaming right now, but we're going to mute if anyone has questions.
Are we ready, Max? Are we ready to go? Let's go.
Just need a few more minutes. I'm just getting the presentation set up.
Hold on.
Are we ready to go, Max, or?
Nope, I just need a moment to get the presentation set up.
All right, good. Well, I'll be precise. Well, I am. Let's see where we are here now. All right. We ready?
Hi, Bill. We're all set. If you're all set,
Are we all set?
we're all set.
All right, welcome to the second half of this forum. And I would ask the representatives from the Volunteers of America to introduce themselves and begin their presentation.
Great. I'll go ahead and start. My name is Brian Seitz. I'm the VP of Business Development for Volunteers of America in Northern New England.
And I'm Travis Drake, and I am the VP of Housing.
And just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, sending your questions in advance. We have a very brief presentation, just to refresh everyone's memory about what it is we're talking about in case anyone's forgotten. So Max, if you just want to jump right into it, I'll just talk a little bit about Volunteers of America in general. Volunteers of America is a well-established national nonprofit. Volunteers of America Northern New England is one of 33 national affiliates. VOA as a national organization was established back in 1896. So we've been around for 125 years. Our particular affiliate was established here in Maine in 1992. We are known nationally as the largest nonprofit provider of affordable housing in the U.S. And nationally, we serve over 1 million people per year. So that's just a little bit about VOA at a top level. Here with our work in Maine and New Hampshire, we really have some very distinct what we call business lines or service lines that we work in. Senior services, of which senior affordable housing falls under. We have 11 affordable senior housing programs here in Maine and 1 in New Hampshire. Veteran services, we do a lot of work with veterans here in Maine. as well as a lot of behavioral health services, both with individuals with severe and persistent mental illness and individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Community justice, we have a community justice program right here in Belfast through the Waldoboro County Sheriff's Office, where we're working with individuals coming out of incarceration and re-entering into society. And we also have some youth and family services as well that we work with kids, especially we have a camp that runs every year called Camp Postcard, where we work with kids from all the counties in Maine, and all of the individuals who run the camp are actual law enforcement. So it's a pretty unique program that we run there. So we span a variety of services. And we offer a couple of different types. We're unique and as far as nonprofits go in Maine. A lot of nonprofits focus mainly on housing or mainly on the services side of things. We kind of straddle both of those lines. So we offer a lot of housing, but also run the programming within that housing a lot of times. So you'll see if you can see on the pages in the back there, we offer group homes where we serve up to 12 individuals at a time. This is, housing that is classified as affordable housing through different programs through HUD, but we also contract with either the VA or DHHS to run 24/7 programming to provide social service support to the individuals who live there. And Max, you can just scroll to the next one with the senior housing. We also offer like I mentioned before, you can scroll up like this. Yeah, right above that one. We also offer, like I said, 11 different senior housing facilities across 10 in Maine, 1 in New Hampshire. I am saying that right, correct? And as you can see there, we have locally here, Thomaston, we have 31 units in Thomaston. Belfast, we have 32 units of senior housing. We're operating these not only as the property owners, but also as the property managers. And we also run all the facilities and maintenance that goes into all these program properties. So we are a complete package when it comes to the development, the management, and the operation of these facilities. So a little bit about what our focus is for senior housing. What we're really focused on is aging in place as independently as possible with these individuals. We don't run assisted living facilities. These are not nursing homes. These are seniors who are looking to live independently, but in more of a more focused community setting. All of our senior housing facilities, we really try to develop them in areas where they have access to the greater community. And we also try to build space within the facility themselves so that they can build communities among themselves. So places where they can have shared spaces, community kitchens, shared meals, and that type of thing. We also offer on-site management and support. These are not 24/7 services across all these facilities, but we do have folks who oversee all the management. And we also, each one of our facilities has what we call a residential service coordinator who works on activities and events and, basic kind of daily living stuff with the seniors there. So if we see them in need of outside support, we can bring a third party in. They're there to help kind of identify those needs. So if we're talking specifically about our project in Waldoboro at the 80 Grace, anything that I forget here, Travis, before I start jumping into that? So a lot of the questions, and Max, I don't know how you want to run this. Do you want me to kind of answer the questions as we go through?
So you can answer the questions as you're going through if you'd like. You can do your presentation, and then we were going to start getting questions from the audience. So they were going to be asked regardless. If you incorporate them in the presentation, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, that's great. So I'm not sure who all can see the slides. I'm assuming everyone online can see the slides.
We're screen sharing, so they're right now looking at the 80 grade proposal.
Yep. So the basic, you're going to see some conceptual drawings of what our architect has put together for Just an overhead view right now of the layout. So what we're proposing is adding 32 units of senior housing. These are all 1-bedroom units. We're going to be using the existing frontage of the building that stands now, the 80 Gray School, and rebuilding what do you call it? A wing off the back to support the additional needs of the units that we'll be putting into the facility. So some of the questions, it might be easier to just kind of read some of the questions. So the first one that we had was, can the two proposals coexist? I'm assuming they're talking about the park proposal. Can the two proposals coexist with VOA rehabilitating the former 80 Gray School for affordable senior housing, and the park proposal utilizing the remaining 7 acres of the town-owned land that would still contain Philbrook Ball Field, the tennis court, and 2 acres of undeveloped land? For us, we love the idea. I mean, we love the idea of having parks associated with our seniors. It's great for activities for the residents who live there. I don't see how it doesn't need to not coexist. So I really don't see any issue with that. No one's reached out to us to discuss it, so we're always open to discussion. So if I could go through some of the next questions, Max, go on.
Bill, would it be better if they just go through the presentation and then we get to the questions, or?
It's up to them. It's really up to them.
Okay, so
Yeah, when we put the presentation together and then I got the questions, I'm like, well, some of the questions are answered in the presentation. So
Sure. That's perfectly fine.
So if you go to the next slide there, for me, Max, there was a question about how large will the final structure be? How many living units? I think we covered that, 32 units. The total square footage within that, I believe, is just south of 32,000 square feet. And the existing units would be somewhere in the area of around 600 square feet a piece. Let me just see here. If I'm getting that right. Yeah. So we're talking about 31,074 square feet is the total floor area across those 32 units. And that includes all the community space, shared kitchen, office spaces for staff, lobby, elevators, all that kind of stuff. So everything, that's all the living space all in. How many parking spaces will be maintained by VOA for affordable senior housing? Will be put in the drawings that our architect came out and did the measurements and whatnot. We've put in 34 spaces for now. We don't think we're going to need 34 spaces, but we wanted to make sure when we did these drawings that we had room for it. I think we've talked about having, as opposed to having one single space for each individual unit, we've talked about having maybe 0.75 spaces per unit, which would bring us down more in the 26 space range. There's a lot of discussion to be had about that. But Travis can speak more, since Travis manages our properties, he can speak more a little bit towards what really we have at other facilities and what those needs are.
Most of our other facilities or senior housing sites, we actually don't have one spot per unit. Usually, probably around 75% of the tenants have vehicles. So we don't really need one spot per unit. Here, if we can get 34 spots, and we'll probably go with 34 spots, and we'll just have extra for visitors.
Okay. So the next few slides are just the basic layouts. You can kind of see where the living units are, where the community spaces are. One of the things that we've talked about in these conversations is that we are keeping the current building to a 2-floor structure, but in the wing or the annex that we're building on the back, there will be a 3rd floor to accommodate an additional 6 units on the 3rd floor. But basically everything with the facade and whatnot will remain the same. Let's see here. If you could scroll to the picture of the map. I wanted to give people a little bit of perspective on some of the questions that we've been asked. And we pulled some information from our Rocky Coast house, which is over in Thomaston. That facility is 31 units. One of the questions we get asked a lot is, where are these folks from? And I actually was able to put together a little map, and so you can kind of see within a 10-mile radius of that facility, 23 of the residents who live, 23 of the 31 residents came from within that 10-mile radius. So 7 came from Thomaston, 7 came from Rockland. I think we got 4 from Cushing and 2 from Friendship. We got 1 from St. George. Got to get my glasses on. 1 from Waldoboro, 1 from Warren. Then we have another 3 outside of that. There were 2 that came from Belfast, 1 from Monroe, 1 from Brunswick. And then there was a couple of other random places, Guilford, 1 from Guilford, 1 from Holton, 1 from Walterboro, and 1 person from out of state. So outside of that, 10-mile radius, you had 8 individuals who weren't necessarily from that specific area. So that's good to know. And Max, please, feel free to to post this so that people can kind of see, because that was that's always one of the big questions. And we don't know, for example, if those 2 individuals are in Belfast that are now living in Thomaston are just waiting for one of the locations in Belfast so that they can move back to where they're from. We just don't really know that. We can only really tell from the data that we have where they were from before they came to us. So I think that's really the end of the slide presentation. So Max, I don't know how you want to go through these questions. If you want to just start at the top, or
why don't we, Max, why don't we start with people there in the audience if they have a question, and we'll go like in a circle, the audience, the Zoom audience, and then the written questions that came in.
So I was about to suggest that. So yeah, we went through the first 3. Is there anyone on Zoom first? No?
There was a question from Laura, I believe, about tech. Laura, would you like to answer that? Ask that?
Oh,
Sure. Yeah, I was wondering whether this building, if this building was historic, and if so, whether you're planning to use federal and or state, federal and state tax credit program.
So you want me to answer? No, you go ahead.
It's currently the building's not
It's
historic, but we are looking at that as an option. I think we're going to work with Max in the town to get it designated.
All right. So that was it. Question in the audience. Yeah.
I'll stare because I can't see through this lady's head. Number 1, I would like to hear that referred to as the old Waldoboro High School, which it was, which is my alma mater. I'm just being serious. A young, handsome man from your company came and spoke to the Waldoboro Women's Club. And he was most informative. But comments, I think your major problem here is making people understand that it is for low income. It is not for welfare. I think many people have the image, we have enough welfare in the town. I think your biggest problem is making people understand this is for over 55 low income. That's how I see it from comments I have heard.
If I might jump in, that's actually a frequently asked question, if you don't mind me reiterating that point.
Go right ahead.
Will the 80 grade project be a Section 8 housing similar to the sprawl block? Is that similar to what you were asking? If not, then please explain the difference.
You want to take the first stab?
Yeah. So the project we're proposing is for, depending on the financing, would either be 55 plus for seniors who would fall into the 60% AMI for Lincoln County, which I think for one person is 30,000. If we seek HUD funding for a 202 PRAC program, the age would go to 62 plus. And the income would drop down to 50% of the AMI, which might be 26,000 right now per person, or for one person. To go back to kind of your comment about low income versus welfare, I don't know the demographics for Waldoboro, the town, and what the average income for a senior is. But I would have an idea that most of the seniors would fall in that $25,000 to $35,000 average income per year. So I think that's the target population, is seniors, in providing affordable housing.
And one of the differences with the sprawl block, I think is one question we get asked a lot, and I'll try to answer this. Travis knows all the technicalities a lot better than I do, but the way I understand, and we have nothing to do with the sprawl block project whatsoever on the Section 8 component at all. So what the way I understand it is that there is a senior component of that, but there's also a disability component with that. So it kind of changes a little bit of the demographic of the individuals who qualify to live in those places. And what we're talking about is specifically for seniors. And there is a federal carve out in the regulations that allows us to just target seniors for this property. And that's what we're going for.
Well, as I said, to me, that's your biggest problem coming in here. Make people understand that this is not welfare. This is for low income senior citizens.
Yeah.
I think that idea is out there among many people, that we don't want any more welfare people. And I know that is not what you're about.
Yeah, and I mean, and to Travis's point, I mean, what we're talking about is individuals either 55 or older or 62 or older, based on the funding mechanism that we go in for the dollars that go into the development of the project. And at an income of an individual of around $31,000 a year, or $26,000 a year is what we said. It really just depends on that cutoff level. Just depends on the type of funding that goes into the project.
So I see George's hand up. George, you have a question?
Yes, actually, two quick ones. Do you have a projection as to how many jobs you're going to create in Waldoboro with operating this?
That's a great question.
Most of our properties like this, we'd have a manager, a maintenance person, and a resident service coordinator. They may not strictly be at that one property 40 hours a week, but ideally we'd at least probably have another 1.5 employees added full time.
So this is not assisted living in the sense of having people there giving out pills or anything.
Yeah. We need to make that distinction. This is not assisted living. This is not a nursing home. This is independent senior living.
So I've got a little bit of a dark question, but I think we'll learn from it. What in these kinds of places, what's the average time that someone lives there?
That's a really good question.
That is a good question. I could actually, if I had known that ahead of time, could have given you a pretty concrete answer. Right now, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 5 to 7 years.
So we get to know these people, they get to know us, they're residents, and they have the library card.
Yeah. And I think to go back to that, I think one of the other questions was the average age across our properties. And I think right now it's probably 78 to 79 years old.
Max, do we have a question from the audience or a written question?
I think it's the written question at time. This was from Karen Clark. Will Volunteers of America put in a riparian buffer to the wetlands near the tennis court area?
So we got this question yesterday. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh at the question. I'm not laughing at the question. It's a hard question to answer because we weren't sure exactly who has the rights to the property near the tennis court. So we don't know the answer to that question simply because we haven't done the land surveys, we haven't done the engineering, we haven't done any of that stuff yet. So if our project is going to damage the wetlands in some way that it would require something like that, then absolutely we're gonna look into doing that. I don't know how to answer that one concretely.
That's all right. Question in the audience. See, Susan?
I'd like to know, are these single person units? What if a husband and wife come in or a partnership wants to come in? Is there no room for that?
They could. It can be up to. It could be a couple that moved in. They're all one bedroom.
They're all one bedroom.
Yeah.
But then the income would raise.
So yeah. So we stated the income guideline. So for like one person, the income is around 30,000. For two people, it's 36,000. And I'm just kind of rounding up right now. But when you add another, like a couple, it doesn't increase significantly.
Okay, I'm thinking about parking spaces here.
Yeah.
Apparently there's a 2 parking spot requirement in the town of Waldoboro, I gather, when you put in an apartment. So you're seeking a variance, I take it?
We would, yes.
Okay.
Actually, Bill, if it's all right, can I make a clarification on that?
Yeah, go ahead very quickly, Max. Yeah.
So that's for regular dwelling units. If it's only a senior housing one, they only need 1 parking space.
Okay.
And
I think I know where people are referring to that. And that was back when we just heard this project for the first time. So I didn't know that there was the exclusivity item. So just to clarify that.
Thank you, Max.
And maybe mention, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that in most of our senior housing facilities, we don't have a 1-to-1 ratio on parking spaces to units.
We have less than that. And I could share the numbers. I don't have it with me, but I could share the numbers.
Well,
Parking spaces that we have. And
I'm thinking a couple might come in and want 2 cars.
And they could. And what we typically find in our senior housing projects, it's not typically couples. I think across the 500 units that we manage in Maine and New Hampshire, we probably have 10 couples. So it's a lot of times as individual maybe who has lost their spouse and is looking to downsize into this like a more manageable space. So they no longer have to worry about maintenance, snow plowing, shoveling, and stuff like that. And that's what we see a lot of times.
All right. On Zoom, George, do you have a separate question or did you just never lower your hand?
I have a brand new question. The whole property is 8 acres, as we've been discussing. Do you have any responsibility or participation in the other 6 acres? I mean, are you going to mow the field down there, or how do you relate to those other acres?
Right now, I think we're only talking about the 1-ish acre that includes the existing building and the parking lot area and, some of the greenlands around it, but
So
not
what
the
do
tennis
you
court
get-
and not the fields off to the side.
What do you get for the dollar?
What do you mean? What do I get for the dollar?
Do you own those fields when you do this deal, or do you?
No, we don't own any.
No.
We would
We're
only.
not asking to own or the field, the tennis court. That's not really part of what we're asking for.
Okay, so from Waldoboro's recreation standpoint, those ball fields and recreational areas are untouched.
Yes.
They would remain that whatever use the town deems them usable for.
Thank you.
In-person
Max?
question?
Yep.
Seth? Well,
Oh, thank you.
Daniel?
In your experience, do your seniors live with children? Are there instances where children live with them?
That's a good question. The HUD programs we operate do allow at the time of move-in. If there are times when like a grandparent might have custody of a grandchild, we have run into that, but and I've been with VOA for quite a few years. I can only think of 3 cases where that's happened, and we're talking like a lot of years.
15 plus.
Yeah. So it's not very common to be, again, we go back to they're all one-bedroom units typically in our senior housing, so it's not ideal.
So you take the children.
In our current senior housing that we have like the HUD 202 funding for, we would allow that at the time of move-in.
At the time of move-in, but if
Yeah.
they've been there 2 years or 2 months or whatever, and the child was not with them, they can't bring a child in at that point.
But the child could stay for 5 years.
Potentially, that's.
Yeah, and we really have to follow the HUD guidelines on our current senior housing where they don't really distinguish like what is a family considered to be a family. So I mean, if our one-bedroom units allow for 2 people and one of it's a grandmother with their grandchild, then we would allow it as long as they still meet the income guidelines in our other criteria.
But you're talking about very rare instances where this.
I understand that.
Okay.
There's a possibility.
Susan, if you don't mind, Daniel has a
Just
follow-up.
one follow.
Very brief.
I didn't look at the blueprint, but, or the plans. What's the size of these apartments, square footage?
600 square feet, give or
I'm
take.
sorry, I
Yeah.
missed that. I'm sorry.
No.
That's going to vary a little bit based on where they are. Some are a little bit larger than that, but about 600 is a good.
Thank you.
So next written question. This is a frequently asked question. Will Volunteers of America maintain this building after the project is complete, or will it be put up for sale sometime in the near future?
So, so we will operate this for as long as possible. So when this is done, everyone's all leased up. We've signed all the contracts with HUD or whomever. We're going to have an obligation to maintain these units for whatever the terms of those contracts are. Could be 40 years, could be 45 years. Generally, those contracts renew ongoing. We will always be the owner of it unless something happens. But whoever would own it after us would have to maintain all the same level of services and whatnot that we would. So we as an organization, our plan is to never sell these things. Like we would never sell those. And if something did happen to VOA and NE for whatever reason, our national office would step in and take over. So VOA would still continue to be the owners on those. So I mean that's a hypothetical, a really big hypothetical. I mean we just don't sell our properties. We preserve every single unit we can because they're super valuable to the mission of our agency.
And forever is kind of a long time. That could be
Yeah.
like 50 years, or are we talking like 200? Or like, it's kind of, all of our properties will come with like a restriction, and whether it's main housing or HUD will hold any owner to that commitment, whether it's usually 45 years, but it could be longer.
But I think the basis of the question may be, are we gonna like build these units and then all of a sudden sell them so that we can profit from them in some way? That's not going to happen. Like even if these properties were sold, they would not be at a profit for anyone who came in and developed them.
All right. I don't see anything on Zoom just yet, so we're going to go ahead and see if there's an audience question. I see Seth.
I have a couple. What assurance is giving Waldoboro residents that tenant occupancy requirements for this project will not change in the future, e.g. for someone other than a low-income senior citizen, for example? The concern is the possibility of future conversion to some other use, for example, general Section 8 housing. Can this be made a binding contract commitment, either in the memorandum of understanding or the optional eventual contract agreement between Volunteers of America and the town? And I would add that in your last comment, you said your Volunteers of America, which I'm sure is correct, is committed to forever owning these properties. But as we know with the sprawl walk, which you brought up just now, HUD changed the rules. Just as an example, we had nothing to say about it. They changed the occupancy rules, and it's now privately owned, I think, by Joe Cloutier, who owns quite a few of them in the state, and all the rules changed. That wasn't anticipated by the town. Nobody meant a bad deal by that, but it did happen not too long after it was built. I think less than 20 years. Can you comment on those things?
Again, I can't comment on Sproulbach because we didn't develop that property, and I don't know that we don't know the history. We just know the program. We're familiar with that program. I don't know of what specific changes he's referring to. Maybe you know.
I don't. Well, again, it's not our property. I'd rather not discuss a property that we don't own, we don't manage, I'm not familiar with. So I can tell you, as far as our commitment, you're asking about a contract, or we're going to have those contracts in place with our funding source, whether Maine Housing, HUD, they're going to have those long-term, like 45-year contracts where we can't change from seniors to another population.
Yeah, I mean,
and I don't know what changed again with the one you're referring to, but just the ones we currently manage, and that we've had, our oldest one is 25 years old. It's the same commitment from 1996 to today.
And these are funding programs that are codified in federal law. And if for some reason they were to make a change to those programs, it wouldn't just impact this project. It would impact millions of units nationwide. So it's just not how that works.
That's why I asked the question, because HUD did change the rules some years ago and privatized a huge amount of the HUD built inventory and sold it very low cost to the contractors. And I'm not saying you're going to do that. I'm just asking you, is there any way you can assure the town that that will never happen? Or could HUD change the rules and you're just stuck?
Well, again, HUD would only be part of, more than likely, if we did have HUD funding, of which it would be the HUD 202, not the HUD Section 8 program. If we did have HUD programming, it would only be a part of the project. None of these funding sources that we're talking about, whether they're low-income housing tax credits, the historical tax credits, the HUD 202, none of those single funding lines will fund the entire project. So we're going to have multiple contracts. They're all going to say basically the same thing, controlled by different agencies. So you're going to have a lot of overlap in the oversight of how these units are run, pretty much in perpetuity. Because once they go affordable, I can pretty much guarantee you that the state or HUD or whoever else is involved is not going to let them slip out of affordability.
All right.
Next question, Max.
I'll go with actually, we'll go online. There's a Karen Drapkin. I don't know if that's the right name. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's my wife. I'm Maya Drapkin, resident of Waldoboro. And I have two quick questions. One is, you have an idea how much the rent would be for these apartments? And is there any projection or possibility for any kind of a coastal train or trans or public transportation to service the apartments?
I can actually look up
Depending on the funding source, if we end up getting like HUD 202 funding, the rent would be partially subsidized and a tenant would pay 30% of their gross income, adjusted gross income each month. So if we're thinking the average income for a person is $1,000 a month, they would pay roughly $300. If we don't receive a subsidy from HUD and it's straight low-income housing tax credit, the max rent might be, I'd have to look it up for one person. It'd probably be around 600,
we can actually look that up while we're here.
But either way, we can provide that too after the meeting.
So we can come back to that. A written question.
You also had a question about transportation services.
Yeah, and I think that would definitely be something we'd look at, seeing if we could partner with Coastal Trans regarding having a few of our senior housing properties will have the CAP agency that every day will visit the property to bring seniors to get groceries or any other shopping trip like that.
Thank you.
I have a written question. Actually, it's another frequently asked question. What is the time frame to sign an actual contract to get this project started? And when this is done, when might the building be ready for occupancy?
So can you repeat the contract part?
So let's say it's approved in June. What is the time frame to sign an actual contract to get this project started?
So are we talking about, all right, I'll answer multiple questions. So there'd be two things. There'd be one, there would be the option agreement with the town, which the option agreement lays out the general information about, how we're going to go about the project and what our intent is with the property and what we're trying to develop here. So that would be part of the option agreement, which would also encompass the purchase and sale agreement. So that is a contractual that's a contractually obligated document that we would sign before we started moving into the next phase, which is looking at pre-development work, which would encompass architectural engineering and those kinds of things. So we'd be setting up contractual relationships with those entities. At the same time, we'd be filing for different types of funding. So we'd be putting in pre-applications for things like low-income housing tax credits, maybe the historical tax credits, those types of things. So there's multiple contracts within this. There's contracts with the town. There's contracts with the contractors and subcontractors and all those kinds of things. And there's also contracts that we'd be signing with the funding entities. When we actually sign on the dotted line is when we are actually given the funding for those things. So there would actually be a loan closing on that stuff. That may not happen until early next year if we get all the funding lined up. So, it may not happen until after Christmas. And then as far as the move-in, the construction lease up, we're putting a window of probably once all the funding is in place, given where we are with construction things going as they are right now, you're probably looking at a 2-year time frame before we're ready for lease up, once from breaking ground to lease up.
Max, there's a couple questions on Zoom.
Yeah, I see that. Laura, we'll go with you first, just because you haven't asked a question during the segment yet.
Had to find the mute button. Thank you. Yeah, and I disclosed this before, but I am a Maine housing commissioner. So just so you know, so I have an interest in affordable housing. The previous presentation suggested some uncertainty about your sort of financial prospects and how it might come about. And I'm wondering, you just went through a little timeline, and I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about so if the town sells you this property for $1, how certain are you that you're going to be able to line up those financing and funding sources? And you've talked about your track record a little bit, but how could you allay some concerns that residents might have that this could just, could fail? What do you think about your ability to be able to get the low-income housing tax credits and get other grants or subsidies that you need or financing that you need? How does that usually work? Could you just talk us through a little bit of that process and your kind of level of secure certainty about it?
Yeah, obviously, nothing's 100% guaranteed on any project, whether it's a private development project or affordable housing project, right? So there are application processes that we have to go through. They are competitive processes. There are multiple funding streams that we'll have to go after for this. But we do have a great working relationship with Maine Housing. We developed several projects with them, so we feel pretty confident in our relationship there. And we also have brought in the Genesis Fund, which is a community lender who deals a lot with gap funding for big projects and that kind of thing. And they're coming in to provide a lot of technical assistance and, their evaluation. They worked with us early last year when we started looking at this project, and their evaluation was this is a solid project. We're going to start scoring stuff here as soon as this vote goes through. And, as we start scoring things and we see how things are going to shake out, the more confident we're going to be. But the folks that we're talking to, both at Maine Housing and our partners at Genesis Fund, they all feel like this is a really strong project.
All right. Any questions? Susan again?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make sure this question got asked. It did get put in as a written question, so I'm going to ask it as a member of the audience here. You folks have talked about the historic tax credits, and I'd like to know what's my understanding that these cannot be used by a nonprofit organization. So there must be a profit organization somewhere that's going to use these tax credits. Is that correct?
I'm not exactly 100% sure.
On the low income housing tax?
No, it's just saying on the
Nonprofits are not allowed to use these credits.
Could I speak to that? I actually have
Yes,
some
please.
information about that.
I wanted to hear it from them.
Well,
Yeah,
okay.
I'd like to hear the.
I work for an organization that works with those houses. That's not true. It's a refundable credit in Maine.
Yeah, that's something that the Volunteers of America could research and get us an answer for.
Yes. Could you do that? Because I'd like to know if there is a required for-profit partner, I'd like to know about who that will be, who their board members are. And what is the ultimate tax advantage for your for-profit partner, if there is one?
So I'm just trying to figure out what the best way to approach this question is because of the way low-income housing tax credit works. It's very complex. We would not have a for-profit partner in this mix, is what I can say. And I can send you more details on how the structure goes for investors in the low-income housing tax credit program and what their advantage is, but that doesn't directly correlate to us. And it's a really complex process with the tax credits because it is coming from private funds. You know, there's private investors that are getting a tax credit, but they're not associated directly with VOA.
Yes, I would like to know how that works.
Sure, we'll be glad to provide you with what the parameters of a LIHTC program look like. So
All right, good.
So, are we doing a written question?
Yeah, and then we'll go. Yeah, we have two other hands up, also on Zoom. Yeah.
Yep, I see George. This question comes from Margot Metric. Please explain what can be expected from the payment bond in the memorandum of understanding. If Volunteers of America does not go forward with the project for whatever reason, how much will the town be asking for in compensation stated in the bond amount, and who will decide upon the amount? The concern is that the town is potentially left hanging like it was after the YMCA agreement.
Yep, something we've talked about to some degree, but we haven't settled anything. That'll be all decided as we negotiate the option agreement. But it is in the MOU. It's referenced in there, and it's just a detail we need to work out with the town.
Want to go to George, Max?
George, what's your question?
Two quick ones. Was there some kind of a regional study to establish that there is a need for this type of housing?
Did we do a regional study for this? No, but there have been several statewide studies that have identified the need across the state.
Okay, so that's all right, good. The other thing is you were talking about negotiating with the town for the lease, the option agreement, whatever it is. Is there any point in that negotiation where funds flow back to the town on an ongoing basis towards covering maybe more plowing or more infrastructure, or anyway, does money ever flow back to the town in lieu of taxes?
Yeah, we work with different towns on different structures, and again, that's something that we'll hammer out in the option agreement. We haven't, like I said, there's several different ways we can go about, payment in lieu of taxes or some sort of, 75% affordable TIF zone. I mean, there's several different ways we can slice and dice that. We just haven't had those discussions with the town yet. So, but that will be part of the option agreement, and it'll all be laid out in that.
So our TIF program could dovetail into this somehow?
Yeah, the TIF you have currently, Max, I think is not an affordable housing TIF. It is
Yeah.
a regular economic development TIF. It would have to transfer to a affordable housing TIF, which I think would have to go to town warrant. Anyway, there's a lot to that TIF question, which is why we need to work out the details. It's funny because I'm staring at a chat box, but I feel like I'm talking to the person behind it. So I'm not sure who to look at when I'm answering.
I'm in the dark right now because the sun's gone down.
Yeah, I can just see your eyeglasses in the dark.
That's all you need.
Max, you want to go to a question from the sent in?
Yep. I have this one from Catherine Osborne. How does this proposal impact Waldoboro Day being hosted at the 80 grade location? I think that's somewhat been answered.
Yeah, I mean, we think that's, I didn't know this existed, but until we got this question, but we think it's an awesome thing to continue. It's a great community building event, and I think it'd be great for the seniors, and I think that's something that VOA would love to be a part of.
All right.
We have another question online. There's two of them there.
Yep. Seth has a in-person question first.
Two parts, or maybe three parts, quick ones. What percentage of your existing projects, built projects, operating projects are new construction versus conversion? That's number one. What is your appraisal of the costs of construction for rehabilitation versus new construction? And would you care to comment on that, number two? And following up on the last question, what have you typically done? You don't know what you'll do with negotiating with this town, but what is a typical example of your, in lieu of taxes, payments or contributions, revenue to the town in towns that you do have an existing contract in place with, whether it's here, New Hampshire, well, forget New Hampshire, Maine. Thanks.
What was the first one again? The first question.
What percentage of the construction of your completed projects are new construction versus conversion, rehabilitation of expensive old buildings like this?
Yeah. Which one do you want to take?
For our current senior housing projects, all of those that we have developed and owned are new. We do have one, but that is a rehab, but we purchased that after the rehab. For the non-senior housing projects that we own, most of those I would say have been more rehab projects, but they're also smaller properties.
But they're also very old, very complex projects. As far as the cost for new versus I guess adaptive reuse is what this would essentially be. So there are limits. It's a per unit cap on each one of those. So the per unit cap on a new construction, based on just looking at the low income housing tax credit funding, is $255,000 a unit, $270 per unit on the adaptive reuse.
So it's cheaper to build new?
Potentially, yeah.
Well, actually, you just said it was.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's it's potentially cheaper. I'm telling you what the caps are per unit. So whether we were to, like, if your point is, should we just demolish the building and build new? I can't tell you what the actual comparison is, new versus adaptive reuse for this particular site.
Just a point of reference, that wasn't my question at all. Why don't you just build new in the Miller Fields? What I was thinking, there's been discussion of a larger, cheaper project. That's all. That was what informed the question. In the last piece?
Which was the pilot. So we can put together, I mean, I'm not sure if you want actual numbers or if you want, because every single project is going to be different, right? Every single town is going to be different. So we can put together a list of how we have worked with different towns and provide that to you guys, and which is exactly what the process we're going to be going through with the select board. So this is not a hidden, we're not hiding anything.
No,
it's exactly what we're doing right now.
For the town to know.
Okay.
So we have, I believe, 10 minutes left. So Laura, if you have a quick question.
No, there's another hand up online also.
I don't see anyone. If they do, they can click the hand again, but
all right.
We'll get to a written comment or a written question. Well, that was answered actually. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to go through which ones haven't been answered.
Have you asked all the questions from?
I found it. Will VOA bring this project back to the voters for approval in the event that there are construction and/or funding plans that change?
Will we bring it back to the voters if there are construction changes?
Construction changes or changes to the funding?
So I'm not sure I quite understand it, because I mean, we're going after very specific funding,
Right.
which we either get or we don't. So like we wouldn't change the parameters of whether we're going to sort of 55 plus or 62 plus. That wouldn't change. I mean, I guess if we did fundamentally change, to your point, if we fundamentally changed the project and said, well, we don't want to reuse 80 gray, then I guess, yeah, I mean, it would make sense to bring it back to the public. I mean, listen, the fact of the matter is, like, we're going to be folks' neighbors for the next, 45 plus years. So the last thing we want to do is build something that no one wants. So if like there is like something significant, like we're obviously going to have some sort of public input on that.
So I did find the person online. It's a Drapkin again. I see the hand up, but I don't know if you're still there.
Nope. I just didn't know how to turn my hand down.
All right. I think George has his hand up, though.
George?
Yeah, my hand is up there for right now. This most recent part of the conversation has sort of intrigued me. Are we having this discussion because AD Gray was available for $1, or because there's a need for this kind of housing in Midcoast Maine? What was the catalyst that got us doing this?
I mean, it's a lot of different factors. I mean, one is that there's a huge need across the region. Two, strategically as an agency, we wanted to expand more housing opportunities across Midcoast. So we specifically went after the Midcoast looking for opportunities. And when we came to Waldoboro, we saw this project, talked to our partners about it. They loved this project. They had known about it for a long time. Other nonprofits had looked at it in the past, and they said we should make a go for it. So I mean, it's just a confluence of factors.
So there are some pluses to doing the renovation of an old school versus building a new building.
Well, yeah, I mean, renovating and maintaining the structural continuity of, something that's been in the town for a long time. I mean, I don't know what the dollar value is on something like that, but yeah, there's a lot to be said to do an adaptive reuse on something like this. But yeah, I mean, we just thought this is a great community and a great project.
Good answer.
Max, do we have any more questions that we haven't answered?
I'd like to ask one in the front, just because you haven't asked a question this whole night.
Right. I think this is a good project for Waldoboro. I was on my name is Kyle Kane. I live here in Waldoboro. I've lived here in Waldoboro for 50 years. And I was on Selectmen back in 2012 when we put up $350,000 of Mr. Bailey's money when the YMCA was going to have it as a rec center or whatever, and they had all these pledges, all this money they was going to come forward, and then it's kind of petered out, and that was the end of it. But I really hate to see that building torn down. I think it's a rugged building, well-made building. I just think we need it in Waldoboro.
Is there a question tied to the comment?
How much revenue would Waldoboro get in taxes from this building?
That's what we were just talking about with that gentleman. I mean, we work with different. We haven't set anything in stone.
Did we get any taxes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that we're not going to we're not asking for zero. That was never our proposal. What we originally proposed was an affordable TIF zone, wherein at 75%. So basically, we were getting a discount on taxes. not a full like free tax load.
We get something.
Yeah.
Well, and with that TIF too, the town, the tax value increases.
It's shelter.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
so
a tax,
it's-
there's tax shift benefits to the town. It's the TIF conversation's a big conversation.
Okay.
We have about 3-4 minutes left, top. So Max, are there any questions we haven't gotten to?
I've got one.
Well, there's also a lot of unwritten ones that people sent in, and I do include those. Will the bulk of the financing VOA intends to raise for the 80 grade project come from the Maine State Housing Authority, assuming they approve the project?
Will the bulk of the financing come from
Maine housing?
Maine housing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine like the low-income housing tax credits and all that, but the HUD 202 program is a separate program. So we don't really know what that ratio is right now.
All right, and there's a follow-up to it. If Maine State Housing does provide funds for the project, will it be necessary to classify the 80 gray building as an historic building in order to obtain other sources of financing?
Maine housing doesn't have anything to do with this, it being designated as a historic tax credit project, right?
No, but I think with any project nowadays, just with construction costs going up, that any financing that you can get, you need, like you have to have multiple sources in order to complete. So so besides historic tax credit, there could be AHP funds. So it's not just one funding source usually nowadays.
Okay, and I do see your hand, but there is a question that just ties into that.
Well, Max, we have time for like 2 more questions. So,
and this will probably be a quick one. You just mentioned the rising cost of materials and building. The cost of building materials has skyrocketed since VOA began this project. I think they are referring to when the cost estimate was back and you presented to the planning board, I think July 15th, 2020. How has the increase in building materials changed your plans?
No, I mean, because we basically, we have to look at the funding caps for the different funding streams. So there was 2 issues with the estimate that we put out originally. One was that we were basing that on 25 units, which I think is what we originally had proposed. We were basing it on numbers from last year. And I want to say it was somewhere in the range of like 6.2 or 6.4. I have to go look at that. But yeah, I mean, obviously the price has gone up on that. So, but like I said, we have to stay within the funding cap. So if you multiply out what is 270 times 30, you're looking at like what, 8.6 cap on that project. So yeah, it's a little different from what we had talked about last year. But again, it's not money we're asking the town for. I mean, this is just funding that we have to come up with.
And Daniel?
Actually, you can take Seth's question first.
Yeah, just a quick one and maybe the last one.
yeah, we have just like 1 minute left. So
There's a huge amount of concern about the availability for Waldoboro seniors in this town about this. I think it's probably the single largest issue going. Is there anything creative that you can think of or suggest or that the town could do to participate in this project with municipal bonding or anything else to make the ratio change from, for example, the Thomaston 20%, the 5 to 7 people, to a much higher availability for our residents in our town? Can we be creative about this? Is there any kind of workable solution for that can let Waldoboro residents know that their folks can go there?
Yeah. So there, obviously we have to follow the federal guidelines, and the federal guidelines say that we, have to take people in the order that they come in. If they income qualify, then they get a position in the facility. However, with all these projects, there is a lot of marketing and advanced work that happens with the town so that you can get the message out and let folks who live in Waldoboro or have relatives who may have lived in Waldoboro and want to return and retire here know about this project and be sure to get their applications in early. Again, we have to follow the federal guidelines with this. But we can do everything we can to market and promote the facility locally as early and often as possible.
all right, I think that's the limit on our time.
Please so.
I'd like to thank the Volunteers of America for their presentation and also for members of the public for their inquiring questions. And generally, I'd like to thank everyone who participated. This has
Bill?
been a very informative opportunity.
And Bill, if I might jump in?
Yep.
So the information that we have received from the Park Coalition as well as Volunteers of America, as long as we get permission from both, we will try to get it up on the Town of Waldoboro website soon, at least by early next week, so that everyone does see where they can watch the recordings of these meetings, where people can see the documents that were shared tonight, as well as any follow-up questions that can be answered later. And also, I want to thank you, Bill, for moderating tonight. That's all I had to say.
All right, good. Thank you very much, Max.
All
Good
right.
night, Waldoboro.